Welcome to today's training, Setting Your Parent Gauge Calendar. I am Sandy Oseguera, NHSA's Data Product Manager, and in this session, we're going to talk about setting up your Parent Gauge Calendar for the school year. This includes how to determine which interview sessions and frequency are right for your program. Let's start by going over a couple of Parent Gauge terms we're using. In Parent Gauge, interviews are conducted by teachers or family service workers to gather PFCE data and strengthen their relationship with caretakers. The interview includes about 25 close-ended questions and 10 open-ended questions, taking around 35 minutes per session on average. When scheduling interview sessions, it's important to take this time commitment into account. Interview seasons are the times of year when a program decides to conduct interview sessions. This is an important distinction as the times that responses are gathered plays a role in determining how things are measured and how we can compare them. And lastly, in some cases, a program may not be able to interview all or most families. In this case, a sample or portion of them are interviewed and used to represent the entire group. That sample can be calculated through Parent Gauge or outside of it. And for instance, if a program has 1,000 families and can't interview all of them, they might choose to interview 15% of families, which would be 150, and use their results to represent the whole program family population. In Parent Gauge, we have 3 interview seasons. An initial interview is conducted at the start of the school year to assess a family's perceived strengths before the program's impact. Program follow-up questions are not included in these interviews. Some programs only conduct initial interviews with families brand new to their program. A mid-year interview usually takes place between 2 months into the school year and up to 2 months before the end of the year. It involves questions about the parent and the program to assess the strengths of the parents, but also how they think the program has impacted those strengths. And lastly, a post-interview is usually done within the last 2 months of the school year ending. This interview will ask the same questions as the mid-year interview, and that's on purpose as an attempt to measure growth in parents' strengths and the program's impact by the end of the school year. Now, while we have 3 distinct interview seasons in Parent Gauge, not every program uses all 3. So how do you decide which interview seasons are right for your program? It might help to consider your program year. Do you have 9 months or 12? And what does your staff's bandwidth look like? Are there a lot of new students that we want to make sure go through an initial interview? Or do we have a lot of new staff that could use built-in checkpoints that we would do interviews? What kind of growth do you want to analyze, and what periods of time do you want to compare? Keep those questions in mind as we review examples of different Parent Gauge seasons. Now, here's a couple of examples of the different ways that you can determine the amount of seasons that you're going to have. So in this example, this is a program conducting 3 interviews in a year. This setup would begin with an initial interview season right at the beginning of the year to get to know our parents and connect them with staff. We'll use those initial results as a starting point for our PFCE data and customize our engagement efforts based on our parents' strengths. Then we'll conduct a second interview a few months into the year so we can gauge whether our parents' responses are improving as they're immersed in the program. And basically, we want to know where's their confidence levels now that they have a couple of months with us. And we can use that information to shape the rest of the school year. And then at the end of the year, a final interview is done to measure how much our parents grew throughout the year and how much they attribute their results to the program. The growth report within Parent Gauge will help you measure how responses changed from one season to the end of the year. I like to say that in a perfect world where no other assessments are done, 3 would be great, but realistically, 2 interview seasons is the most common setup we see programs use. With 2 interview seasons, we typically forgo the initial interview. The initial interview only asks those parent-specific questions, and if I want to measure program impact, I want to start with a mid-year interview. That means we do need a couple of months of program experience so that we can measure program impact along with the family strengths. Once those results are in, we can guide resources, curriculum, and family outreach efforts to areas where parents say they need it the most. And then at the end of the year, my program can conduct post-interviews at our final parent meetings. And with those results, I can see how my parents ranked their strengths and our impact and compare the growth between that first mid-year interview and my end-of-year interview. And Finally, some programs don't have the ability to conduct multiple interview seasons a year. So conducting even one interview in each program year will still be beneficial. A mid-year interview is often the best once-a-year check-in because then it gives our parents a few months of time to experience the program, but we also get results early enough so that we can update and customize the program plans for the rest of the year. And once we have multiple years of interview sessions, you can compare year over year results to measure programs' growth and trends in parents' strengths and challenges. So timing is an important factor to consider when deciding on the number of interview seasons. Our user data shows that initial interviews are typically done in October, mid-year interviews are usually done in November, and post-interviews in May. You'll want to think about the timing of other assessments and your program's bandwidth when you're deciding what those timeframes are going to look like. Another important factor to consider is, what do you want to analyze? If you want to measure growth within a year, you'll have to conduct at least 2 interview seasons. And then on the other hand, if you only need to measure year over year results, 1 checkpoint a year might suffice. Knowing your specific analysis needs will help you decide the frequency and the timing of your program's interview sessions. And with that, closes our session for today. If you have any additional questions, email us at parentgauge@nhsa.org. And if you're in the system and navigating through and you have a question, feel free to open a ticket by clicking contact in that top menu in ParentGauge. Thank you.